All right, here we go. Looks like we're live. Crazy stuff just going on in the news this weekend. It's Friday. There's apparently, not to go too political into this, I'm just in it for, honestly, the PR and the media of it. That's what I'm fascinated about right now in the election. But there's been calls in the Democratic Party for Biden to step down. And, I just have so many questions. And apparently he might do it as soon as this weekend. But the thing is like we're like 4 months out from the election, and everyone says Trump has won, which everyone said Hillary was going to win in 2016. So I don't believe it until the votes are in type deal. But it's just one of those things that's wild. Anyways, today gonna be doing one of Alex Hormozi's videos. He actually put this one up 4 days ago. His cadence of videos was really high, and then it dropped down to not a lot, and now it's picking back up again on YouTube. Really fascinating. I think part of it too is he just got his team in a lot better sync, create some SOPs to take a lot of his trainings that he's doing with either his holdings at acquisition.com and recording those trainings that he does with them, and or the trainings he does with the winners of the school games. And just between those, that adds like a lot of extra training clips that he can put up. And if he does like one of those training days for each of those groups per month, and he does it for a 6-hour block during the day, that's 6 hours. This is like a 38-minute long video, 39-minute long video. And you can just really take advantage of that, and the fact that you just have so much more content. That's like 6 per one. That's 12 pieces of long form content. Plus, then you only film, you know, let's say 10 more videos throughout the month, 2.5 a week. And mercy, you're just cruising. So with that being said, we're just going to jump into it here. Yeah, I'm going to start with my face up here today. We will see how that goes, just because usually this looks like a less edited video, but his edited videos just have stuff come up everywhere, and I try and move it to be accommodating, but let's just see.
Each of these 4 problems in order to make more money and scale. And the first of those problems is figuring out the customer that you're actually going to serve. And in talking to many of you, the issue is you have no idea. And that's okay. Because in the beginning, you need to sell everyone because you have no money and they have a pulse and a credit card, and you only require one of those things. And so you ask them for their credit card so that you can pay your bills, so you can actually make your business work. And that's okay, and that's normal, and that's expected.
Literally where every business starts, especially like service providers, you will literally do anything. Doesn't matter if you're doing like door-to-door home services, doesn't matter if you're doing accounting services, doesn't matter if you're doing business marketing or business consulting services to like gyms like Alex Hormozi does, or to service providers like we do at Laney Media. Literally, you're just trying to get people in the door to pay your bills.
But when you keep taking every single Tom, Dick, and Harry who can give you, a third down today, and I'll pay you when I get paid, and everything else. And they're like, hey, do you think you could, give me the world? And you're like, I could give you 2 worlds. And they're like, awesome, here's my credit card. Again, bill me on the 5th. That's when I get paid, right?
But that's when you also get miserable clients, and you start to not love your business so much.
You deal with all of these bad customers, and you promise the world, which is normal in the beginning because there's only you, and you maybe can help this person in a completely unscalable way, and that's what you should do because you just need to generate income, you need to generate word of mouth, you need to help people out. Cool. But there comes a point, and it's usually around $1 million a year, sometimes $3 million a year, where the operational complexity of the business becomes really tough because now you've got a lot of different customers that all have different needs, that have different promises at different price points that you've sold, and they're still just you. And so this process is the sticking point. This is sticking point number 1. What you have to do is you have to learn how to say no to people who are not the ideal customer. And if you're like, well, I don't know who my ideal customer is, that is the problem. And so you take all of the customers that you have sold over your entire history, and then you look at them and you say, which of these people do I love? Okay, column 1. Which of these people have spent the most money? Column 2. Which of these people did I have the highest operational profit from? Column 3. Column 4. Which of these was the easiest to deliver on? And so you look at these different lists and you're like, are there any common themes? Are there any people who are in 2 or 3 of those columns? I really like them. They made me a lot of money. And it was really easy to deliver the thing. Well, that's weird because that's not the main thing that I sell. But I guess I have sold a few of those. Well, if you were to then take that concept and say, well, if 10% of my customers are in this really ideal bucket, what if I had 100% of my customers that were just like that? So you take the same amount of customers you currently have, but they were all just that customer. If you do the math again, you usually make 5 to 10 times more money. And the cool part about that process is that it doesn't require more infrastructure. You already have the infrastructure to service that number of customers. You're just servicing the wrong people because you haven't learned to say no yet. And so one of the most attractive things in marketing and sales is saying, I don't need your money, because it makes everybody want you more. And so what you do to harness this is you tell everybody you actually don't want to sell that you actually don't want to sell them. And crazy, I know. And then you let the people who are the right type of person, because they're like, oh, I'm not.
It's literally just like scarcity mindset, or not scarcity, but it's like the scarcity effect when you limit the supply, like, oh, I don't need your money, and then people like want you more because you're harder to obtain.
I'm not that, hate those people too. Oh, and you say, but if you just happen to be this perfect unicorn that has these 2, 3, 4 traits, I can absolutely change your life in this very specific way. That means a lot to you. And they're like, wow, sounds like this ad's just for me, and that's exactly what I want. And guess what happens now? Once you make that kind of change in messaging, you attract more of that right type of customer. You can now charge the premium price, even at the more operationally efficient and productized service level, because now you're doing the same thing for every single customer. So you get better at doing it. So you get higher percentage success rates. You do it at higher margins because you both have higher price and lower cost for doing this. And this is how you solve problem number 1. But you have to learn how to say no. And most people literally never learn. And so I have had this conversation so many times that I want to shout it into a microphone, which is what I'm doing right now. Okay, so that's how you solve problem number 1. Problem number 2 that I see businesses get stuck at where they're in rock and hard place. They're like, I don't know what to do. It's 2 sides of the same problem. You either charge too little or you pay too much. And I want to put caveats around this. I'm a big believer in hiring great talent. I'm a big believer in bringing good people in. Absolutely. But if you want to have a frozen yogurt store and you want to pay the people behind the counter 20% of revenue each, your business will not make money. If I'm lying, I'm dying. If you have a physical therapy, where are you at? Physical therapy clinic, and you give 50% of revenue to every one of your people.
Oh, mercy. Yeah, I think this is just going to be the end of me. I think I'm going to break down and get YouTube Premium.
Here. You have to nail the individual model where you can make enough money at full capacity. And so, which is going to trickle into problem 3. But you get into this position where, like, wait, I realize now that I can't give profit shares to every single person. I specifically can't give revenue shares to all these people. Or my salesmen can't make more than I do, right, in the business. And maybe they do in the beginning, but at scale they shouldn't be able to more than the owners, right? Then you have something that's mismatched. And so you have to have these moments, because otherwise business owners will stay in this lane for years. Because they'll just say, like, well, if I tell them I have to change their comp, then I'm going to lose them. And I'm like, yeah, and if you don't, you'll never grow. So which one do you want to do? And so the nefarious part about each of these problems is that they have appearingly impossible issues with each one of them. With the first one, you're like, well, I can't say no to money because I need the money in order to pay my bills. But by saying yes to people who aren't the ideal customer, then I will never be able to grow this business because I won't be able to charge the premium prices, get the best customers, have the operational margin that I need in order to expand. And so all of these are rock and hard place problems. But you have to have the intestinal fortitude, and this is why your lifestyle is your competitor's opportunity. What you require to live on is what prevents you from being aggressive in the business to make the best decisions for the business, because the business doesn't care. Like, the ideal perfect version of your business exists. You just have a number of steps that you have to take to get there. And the people who get there faster are the ones who are willing to stomach uncomfortable conversations, low profit months, and a hit on their lifestyle for extended periods of time. And so you being able to be aggressive with your lifestyle, when I say aggressive, I mean being able to live on very little, especially when you're in that 1, 3, 5 million a year range, allows you to take bigger risks, think longer, because you're like, okay, we're going to change this thing. Well, I've got 100 grand saved up, and so I can stomach a year if I need to take nothing out so that we can make this pivot, because this was right for the business now. And more specifically, this is right for the business for the next 5 years. And so, rock and hard place. So if you're with I have all these employees and they're all compensated incorrectly, you have to sit down and you have to say, hey guys, and this is how I deal with all really hard conversations. I just tell the truth. I messed up. I said that I was going to help you guys grow with this business. I said we were going to do these big things, but based on the decisions that I made, because I'm a numbnuts, I mispriced your compensation. And because of that, I'll never be able to give you career growth. I'll never be able to reinvest in you. I'll never be able to have the opportunity to open new locations or move up in this business, because this business will not grow based on how this works. But if you're willing to go on this ride with me and change how compensation works, and to be clear, I'm taking nothing. So like, you work every month and you still get a paycheck. I work every month and I get poorer. That's the difference. So I just want to be clear, I'm in this ride with you and I'm not asking you to do something I'm not willing to do. But if you're willing to go on this ride with me for 6 months, maybe 12 months, we're going to have opportunities to be 10 times bigger than this, because it's right for the business. But you have to have that talk. Otherwise, you will be stuck in this, well, if they leave, then I won't have a business. And some of them will leave. And guess what skill you get to develop now? The ability to recruit talent with your new compensation structure, with your new vision of what's going to happen in their lives, along with your business. So that's the second problem. And the second point. And each of these are just these levels that people just go around. And they just stay stuck for years. This part 2B of that one is not charging enough. And so this is how it presents. Hey, my business is at full capacity. My business is at full capacity. And we're not making that much money. And so I think I need to open a new location, or I need to add another product line. When this is the core thing of the business. if the core thing of the business at capacity, even at a small level of capacity, like if you have one rep that can handle 10 people for your agency, or you have one physical therapist who can handle 50 patients, it doesn't matter. There's gonna be some ratio of cost of goods sold and what you charge, and then you have other costs associated, administrative and fixed costs, whatever. And there's going to be a point of capacity with that small unit where if you're still not making money, the business model is flawed. And so either you need to find a way to dramatically decrease.
So, and this is especially common when it comes to coaches, consultants, agency owners, and even if you're looking at like the kind of like the franchisees like model where you install garage doors, you are a roofer, you do pest control, like all of these, like it's getting over that hump of that first like 1 to 2 franchises, in that case, or getting beyond like the 1 to 3 million mark, mark swamp, for those online businesses. And that's where we're currently at. Like this video, it's kind of sad how much of the stuff he has been saying resonates with me, because you get in this swamp between 1 to 3 million, and even like all the way up to 5, because inflation's kind of done weird stuff. But it's like you're making a lot of money, you think you're making a lot of money, but you're not making that much money, and you run into issues where you're wearing a lot of different hats in the business. And yeah, I think this is where he comes into narrowing down the customer base to make your life easier.
Decrease the cost that you have to deliver, which sometimes is the compensation of the employee team if it's way off, or oftentimes it's just you're charging too little. And there's all these ethical things of like, I feel like an imposter. And I'm like, dude, you're not an imposter, you're broke. You only get imposter syndrome when you pretend to be something you're not. Like I get this question all the time, like, I feel like an imposter for charging that much money. You only feel like an imposter because you're lying. If you, like I had an agency owner yesterday who said, I had an agency, I got to 150 clients, and I have a really good client getting system, but that business stalled because I didn't know how to operate. And so it kind of like crashed and burned, but I knew how to get customers for my agency really, really well. And he's like, but I feel like an imposter charging for that system. And I was like, why? And I was like, is it because you're pretending you were a really successful agency owner? And he was like, yeah. I was like, well, then why don't you just tell the truth and say, I got 150 customers despite not knowing anything about running an agency because the system's really good. I suck at operating. And so for that reason, I'm just gonna give you the system and you can figure out how to operate the business. I was like, I still believe you. And then you don't feel like shit. He was like, oh, I guess I can just tell the truth. And so the whole imposter syndrome around charging, if someone, like you only have that if you're misrepresenting something. If a customer wants to pay you for something, and you have the thing, and they're willing to exchange, it's voluntary, you're not holding a gun to them. It's voluntary exchange. That's how capitalism works. You have a thing, they want the thing, and there's a price that they're willing to pay for it. If they're willing to pay for it, phenomenal. Like that's capitalism. We won. And so we try and do it as many times as we can. And so the idea of like having ethics around price is ridiculous. If they're and you don't want to sell out of your wallet either. If you're broke, but the thing that you provide provides a lot of value to a specific person, then you charge based on the value, not based on what's in your wallet. If you're broke and you're like, this really would help me, it's like, cool, it'll probably help them even more. And if it just happens to help you, that's how capitalism works. Both parties say thank you. So, part 2B, if you're at full capacity and you're not making money, you often need to just charge more for the thing you have. And if people say no, fine. Guess what you get to learn? How to sell better. And that's a skill that if you want to build this big business, you're going to have to learn anyways. So you might as well face that boss now. Instead of just forever being in this like, I guess I need to expand this business that already doesn't work, but I don't have the money to expand because the business doesn't work, right? And so it's just
Yeah, too relatable in certain senses there.
possible place that you spend for years and years. Where's my phone? I wrote them down. I should know them all, but
Oh, look, and I love to add in, especially like for beginners, because like hormozi speaks at one level. It's like if you're just starting your business, like a lot of this stuff is just going to go over your head, and you'll be like, oh, that makes tons of sense, but it doesn't really make sense until you get there. And you think it makes sense now, but it's not going to for like other reasons. Until you really run into all of these set issues. The really funny thing about all of this, at least in my opinion, is how many, like, this is just like, this problem is like with every entrepreneur in every industry ever. If you can get beyond the point of scaling, beyond like 3 to 5, I'm not going to say it's smooth sailing. Obviously, every business, like, you know, you're walking through a minefield until you hit a mine, and then you have to, you know, fix the problem, right? But I feel like it becomes a lot easier because then it's not just you as an entrepreneur. You can actually hire people. You can actually like hire a CMO or a sales team manager, people who are better than you at those really critical, vital tasks at marketing and keeping revenue coming into the business. And even like an operations person, you might not be the best person at keeping the trains running on time, but you get to that certain point where you can hire them. And this is what I'm trying to learn, guys. This is actually what I'm trying to learn, because we're at the point where it's like, if we can get to 5 to 10, honestly, I would love to be, you know, love to have an 8-figure business that has a solid 20 to 30% profit margin. I think we can achieve that. And it would help us hit our goals like financially, investing. It would help us hit our goals for like what we want to pay our team. It would help us for our lifestyle, like all of these different things that go into why we want that specific goal. The big thing though, and it's kind of hard, is like I don't know if I'd want to go bigger than that specifically with like the current business that we have. There's different things that we could do, but it just, it kind of depends.
Sometimes I forget things. So let's see. What do we think problem number 4 is, or number 3 is? Oh, that actually leads perfectly. So I remembered it before I pulled it up, for the record. The third problem that every business has to solve is not getting over your skis, not over expanding. Okay? So problem 2 often leads to problem 3, is that you're not making enough in the core business, so you say, great, I'll do more of this. But more in that instance is more of the wrong thing. Like a little bit isn't working, let's try a lot. Right? You're scaling the problems, not the solution. And so, right? Glad that one hit. And so the idea, and this happens most frequently. I want to say most frequently with brick and mortar because it's such a clear unit where you're like, I have one location that's doing mediocre, but I want to have a big franchise. Like, I can't tell you the number of times I talk to local businesses who have.
Well, and just to like throw it out, like to be 100% clear, like I know the 2 biggest issues we have at Landing Media. One is re-signing and retaining clients. We haven't tried really at all to do it, even though we could have. I think part of it in relation is kind of like where our pricing is at. The next one that I feel like is a major issue per se is consistent lead flow, because we do all of our stuff with organic content. And a lot of it is based off of short form. It feels like YouTube or podcast stuff where it's like kind of search, or it's almost more consistent for your followers to see that content going out. I don't think it'll be as big of an issue. We're working on building out those channels, but most of our content is short form content that, again, has short lifespan, is really good at driving traffic very quickly, but it's very much like a treadmill that you're on. And because we don't like run ads or do cold outbound or do affiliates, we're kind of like locked into this weird spot where we're, especially like with my wife Kenda, where she wears multiple hats in the business. Her biggest hat is obviously marketing, but it's hard to do other things in the business if, in fact, your job is marketing. But then it's hard to market if you have to do other things in the business. So it's kind of just this revolving door of chaos. So one of the things I would add in here, and like he said, like expanding, like, getting in front of your skis. Obviously, if you've ever skied before, you've gone in front of your skis, you're usually going to take a tumble downhill. Not too much fun. But if you can figure out ways you can scale your lead flow and your traffic, leveraging either capital, leveraging affiliates, whatever it is, you can really, I'd say, almost like dampen those issues. The other thing that you can do, and if you can focus on this, is if you can make and Hormozi talks about this all the time. If you talk to Dan Martell, if you talk to any of these big business influencers, they talk about it. But it's like making sure that your product's good enough that at least 20-30% people come back and buy it again. And if you can do those 2 things, like, you're kind of going to cruise through it. But the issue is you always have to figure out what it takes to do this if you don't have the experience, at least from what I view. And I watch a lot of people. I watch a lot of entrepreneurs that create content do this and go through this. And there's very few exceptions, at least in my opinion, to the rule where people just glide through this. And the only people who are able to glide through this, if you look at really big celebrities like Logan Paul, who launched Prime. And the reason why he's able to do it is he's able to leverage the fact that he's going to sell, 1 million units a month or whatever, to say, hey, I need to hire a world-class operations person or a world-class, XYZ person to fulfill. But that's also because he's already built like a really solid foundation on his content creation business, right? And everything he does there. So it's almost not fair because in a sense, he already does have the experience. So it's just one thing to keep in mind. And this is also why, like, would you rather own 100% of $1 million business or, 50% of a $50 million a year business, right? Obviously, 50% of a $50 million a year business is worth a lot more. So it's like, are you willing to partner with people in order to get from where you are to where you want to be?
Of this issue. And it's mostly because we have this ego thing around growing revenue. And so a lot of you guys are like, when I say, what's your goal? It's like, I want to go from 1 million to 3 million, or from 3 million to 10 million, or from 10 million to 30 million, whatever it is, right? Like, everybody's got this big number goal. And so what happens is you make the goal the thing that you focus on. But when the goal is an output, you then get weird about inputs because you try and make the output occur, rather than thinking, I have to fix this model where once I get the inputs clear, I jam as many high quality inputs into it, and then revenue occurs. Revenue is a consequence, not a goal. And so the inputs that we put in the system, so when we make what we're going to do for content, we talk about how many pieces of content we're going to make, what the schedule of that content is, what's the checklist we're going to follow that will increase the likelihood that these video views go to the right people and get the most of them to see it. If we hit 100 million, not who cares, of course we care, but what will it change about what we do? All we know is that it'll just give us feedback to change our inputs. But if you make me hitting this number and not attach it to what you have to do, then you start building really stupid things. And so this is the classic internet marketer who scales too fast for their course business. This is the agency who just takes on lots of clients because they want to hit this revenue goal, or the brick and mortar business owner who opens up a second location when their first one isn't even working.
Oh my goodness, no. Whew. Almost had to listen to the Liberty commercial there. That was not good. Yeah, here we go.
And so it's like they want to get to 3 so fast that they'll never get to 10. And so we did that little thing earlier where
and that's like one of the things, and it's one of the things I've struggled a lot with. Like I said, we do organic content. So it requires either me or Ken to sit down in front of the camera like I am right now, talking to you guys, and create the content. Now that's really hard to scale because, if I could just say, hey, get 10 people to create content and we'll drive all this traffic to this landing page and we have this landing page that converts and then we have like our sales team all optimized, like it'd be a lot easier to just be like, okay, boom, you put those inputs into the system and revenue is going to result. But like when you're just like chasing the number, but you're not changing things in order to hit that number, that's when like the real issues, like at least in my opinion, occur, and what he's talking about here. But it's really hard, like for example, with what we do, because like our 2 bottlenecks are A, retention, and then B, lead flow. And we've really redone and reworked on our retention, which I'm really excited to see where that goes in the next 3 to 6 months. However, our lead flow, it's a roller coaster, right? It's organic content. Sometimes you get 1 million views, sometimes you don't. I'm a little excited because the YouTube channel is doing well, but more importantly, TikTok's algorithm is really favoring search content right now. And we're getting a lot of views from SEO on TikTok, which is absolutely insane. So that's a little like of where we are currently at. Can't really argue with anything Hormozi has said in this video because it's honestly, not having done it, but going through it seems all pretty spot on to me. When we do get through it, I'll let you guys know what I think about this.
If you build a building as fast as you possibly can, you can't add more on top of it. It just breaks. The foundation's not there. And so oftentimes, the fastest way to a $100 million business is slower to 10, but faster from 50 to 100. And so if you can actually have that perspective, you won't care if it takes you 3 years to get the single location right. Because once it's dialed, then when you copy paste it, it works. And so the big thing that's missing when you're doing the overexpansion thing, I'll tell you what the core issue is. It's who. You sell too many people too fast before you hire and train good enough people to backfill. And then you get too many people in with not enough talent. But you have bodies and not brains. And so now you have to keep selling more people to manage your overhead of all these dumb people that you haven't taken the time to train. And they're dumb because of outputs, and the reason that they're dumb is because you didn't train them. And the real dummy is you. Because either you weren't patient enough to interview more people, or you weren't patient enough to train them. But both of them are your fault. So you get overexpanded because you have this arbitrary goal that was around growth and not quality. Quality creates growth. Growth creates bloat. So if you make growth the goal, bloat is what occurs. If you make quality the goal, growth occurs as a result. So make getting better the goal, and then you will get bigger. If you make bigger the goal, you'll get bigger, and you'll get worse. And so when I hear the many problems that come here, oftentimes you're over your skis. You overextend. You have too many people and not enough smarts. And so rock and hard place. I have to keep selling these customers so I can cover this overhead, but my reputation is getting worse and worse and worse because I can't deliver on the promises, but I have to keep making the promises so I can pay my bills. And that's where your lifestyle comes into play again. You're like, I made a goof up. I need to decrease my lifestyle. I'm going to stop taking money out of the business. And I need to have some hard conversations, and I probably need to work overtime for a while. The thing is that the overtime isn't like a week or a month. Sometimes it's years. And it's tough, like it's tough. You give up weekends over and over and over and over and over again. It's not like you give up weekends, you don't remember the last time you took one, right? And so I say this out of care, but like, you have to be, like, the hardest part of being in business is that you will always encounter these rock and hard place scenarios because you don't know everything. And until you've been there, you're like, this is all going great until it's not. And then you realize you're whoopsie. And so I think your willingness to endure the pain of undoing your poor decision is what will get you out of the long-term pain faster. But the short-term pain is way worse. And this is where the growing pains come in, because let's say you do pull it back. You stop selling as many new customers so that you can focus more on training the team up, interviewing new candidates, maybe even having to pay them more because they're more qualified, because they come in with some knowledge that you don't have. Profit starts to dip. So what do? Well, you know that if you keep going on this path and you do fix delivery, you do fix churn, all of a sudden you can't get your head back out of water because now you're selling people and they're staying. And all of a sudden you're starting to get referrals again because word of mouth is picking up. And then all of a sudden your profit goes back from negative to neutral to up to your previous max, but then it just keeps going again. And then you get excited and you make another dumb mistake. And then you have to repeat the process again. And so the thing is like the entrepreneurial growth path, the pain of it is the big mess ups you realize you make that you then get into the rock and hard situation. And most people can't make a decision, so they just straddle it and stay in the mediocre middle, destroy their reputation, and stay stagnant for years. And so you have to, like, whatever that hard sticking place you're at is you just have to confront it as fast as humanly possible. And so it's like, I always would rather have intense short-term pain rather than very long-term pain of not living up to what I think I can do. So that's sticking point number 3. Number 4. I will say this until I'm blue in the face. But the 4th problem that every business owner has to conquer is focus. And what is so nefarious about focus, it's so sneaky because we are rewarded as entrepreneurs for taking a leap of faith, for taking a jump when there's nothing there, and then something starts to work. And so that's such a rewarding experience. You go from complete control to complete freedom. Well, technically you go back to control again, but I won't get into that. And in that moment, you're like, this was the best decision of my entire life. And the problem is that you should never do it again. Because what happens is you reinforce such a strong loop where you're like, man, and then when this gets hard, like my job was, you then think, oh, I'll do the same thing I did last time. I'll switch. I'll try something new. And then that'll be exciting and new, just like in your relationship. And then all of a sudden, you get out of the honeymoon phase and you realize, oh, there's problems in this business too. And then you're like, oh, I'll do what worked that other time. It still worked half of the time. And so then you jump again. But the reason that it's so nefarious, besides the fact that it's encoded in your DNA from being an entrepreneur, from quitting your first thing to do this to begin with, is that every time it looks different. And that's why focus is so tough. And there's always a very strong argument for why you should do the new opportunity. And that's why, by the way, as a sales pitch, new opportunity is a great way to sell. Because it's so hard to have the discipline to be like, nope, I'm just going to keep doing the thing that I've been doing for 10 years, and I know the good, and I know the bad, and I know them both. And I know where I'm deficient, and I just need to do these things better for the next 6 months. And if I just do those things better, we will grow by 50%. And here's the fun fact about this, is that once you get to $1 million a month, $5 million a month, $10 million a month, 100 grand a month, whatever, going from that to 50% more, a lot easier than going from 0 to whatever number you were just at. So if you have your current thing, you forget how much you've learned about what you're in. You're in there for 3 years, 5 years, however many years you've been in real estate, right? A lot. And we forget about it. But this other thing has all of these booby traps all over it, right? This lady in the red dress has chlamydia. She's got daddy issues. She's got an ex-boyfriend with a gun who stalks her, right? You don't know yet because she presents the same. Because anybody on a first date can look good. Anybody on one sheet, it's like, hey, my buddy's making a killing on this, right? And he's like, oh yeah, I married her sister. Didn't tell you about the baggage, right? That's part of it. And that's why the focus part is so.
Yeah, and that's like every client you like ever sign into your business. You just don't know, right? Until it comes out. So beware of those landmines.
Tough, and I had to define focus for myself, and I'll define 2 words for you because it's helpful for me. So one is commitment. What is commitment? A lot of you guys are like, I'm committed. Commitment is the elimination of alternatives.
I think he's going to go a little extreme with this answer. I think there's definitely different levels of commitment, but yeah, let's see what he says.
Very simple. And so if you want to become more committed, you eliminate alternatives. And so there's an old story of this where the football coach asks one of the kids on the football team out to breakfast. And so, they're sitting there having a good time, talking about his game, talking about his future. He says, I'd like to play college ball. And he's like, I think you could. I think you could play college ball. He's like, but you might not too. He's like, well, what do I have to do? He's like, well, it depends. He's like, depends on what? He leans in. He's like, are you interested or are you committed? He's like, well, I'm committed. He's like, I don't know if you are. He says, you see your plate? And he's got eggs and he's got ham on his plate. He says, the chicken's interested. He's like, the pig's committed. And the point there is that in order for that breakfast to occur, the chicken keep having eggs over and over and over again. But that pig only has one breakfast it's serving. And so the same way is that we have to eliminate alternatives. It's what we like.
Other story to add into like being committed. Everyone talks about burning the boats. It was like some conquistador they got to where they were going. They had this place they had to take over, so they literally burned the boats. The only way for them to survive was to defeat their enemy, aka burn the boats. Just kind of another interesting little story where you are literally left with no other options. Just kind of like the ham.
The word decision comes from Latin decidere, which means to literally cut off or to kill off. And so the idea is, what are you killing today? What really juicy, incredibly sexy opportunity that you could crush, you turn down today because you made a commitment. And I've been thinking a lot about the decisions in my life that have had the biggest return. And the more I've thought about this, the more I think that, actually I'll read this to you because I think it might come across better that way. So I wrote this down earlier today, which is, the best diet is the one you follow. The best person to marry is the one you stay with. The best business is the one you stick with. The thing that makes it the best isn't the thing itself, it's our commitment to it. And so there's a lot of different diets that work if you stick with it. There's a lot of different businesses.
Get online in minutes. Web.
if you stick with it. But none of the diets will work if you don't. And none of the businesses will work either. And I think it's a very good framework. There's a perfect diet for you that's perfectly measured and will get you the absolute fastest results. But if you do not stick with it, it won't happen, ever. And so it's not about the actual intricacies of the diet, it's about your willingness to stick it out. And so when you listen to Bezos and you listen to Steve Jobs and you listen to Sam Altman, who was in charge of YC before he started OpenAI, they talk about this one thing and they're like, the more I thought about it, it's just persistence. It's just being willing to stay the course, despite all odds, despite the many shiny objects that come your way, and just say, I get it, no. So
super funny thing, not everyone loves Trump, but one of the things he talked about or talks about relatively consistently is he talks about how he knew so many people who could have been extremely successful if they just stuck it out. And that's kind of one of the things that's really interesting, and is like my dad's a farmer, for example, and he first generation farmer on his side, in a lot of generations. And so he started with no land, no equipment, no anything. And for him to get to where he was successful, which is where he is now, where when he farms, he has mostly paid off land, paid off equipment, very little liabilities. He only has the inputs for his crops. So now he's the most successful, but he had to stick with it for 30 years to get where he is today. And yeah, and it's just so interesting because I see so many people start different little side hustles, little businesses, and then they end up quitting. And it's literally because they didn't stick with it that they weren't successful. It's not that the vehicle wasn't successful or wasn't fast or wasn't good enough or whatever. It's that the driver wasn't able to keep driving.
Commitment is the elimination of alternatives. And I measure focus by the number and quality of things I say no to. And so if you want to give yourself a rapid reward cycle, which I like to do because the hardest of these ones that I struggle with is focus, is that every time I say no, I give myself a mental point. It's I'm focused. I'm making an active decision to stay focused because I know that if I just only stay focused, it's hard to imagine a guy or a gal who's an entrepreneur and does just one business for 50 years and consistently has the hard conversations and just says, I'm going to get better, I'm going to keep learning, I'm not going to repeat the same mistakes, and they do that for 50 years and doesn't become unbelievably successful. It's hard to imagine a world where that would exist. And so we have this blank check from the universe that says, I guarantee that you will be successful no matter what if you do one thing, which is you just say no to everything else.
Yeah, success is a function of time. The more time you put in, the greater the success is going to be. And it's kind of like a hockey stick, right? With the exception being, I have a lot of hard workers in my family. Not all of them are rich. The big thing you have to remember, and what you have to do is you have to be working towards the right things, obviously making sure your vehicle is right. But if you're already in a business, most businesses have really good scalability. Because if you look at Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant, where you have employees, 1099, self-employed people, business owners and investors, you're already on the right side of the graph where you are technically, in the right spot. Per se, everyone wants to be bottom right where you're an investor, but business owner is also really good because that provides a lot of free cash flow if you do it right to then invest.
Else. And so when I have these conversations, the woman in the red dress always presents differently, and that's why she's so sneaky. And there's always a very legitimate reason why you could make money with it. And the reality is you could, but you can't do two things. You can't be CEO of two businesses. You can own multiple businesses, but I'm going to be real with you. You don't. You're CEO of both, and you're running everything, right? No. I've scaled myself out of the day-to-day. So if something happens in the business, what happens? My phone rings. Right. You're not out of the day-to-day. If you buy a share of Apple, you're out of the day-to-day. All right? You're an owner. And so use that as your litmus test. Do I own this business or does the business own me? If it owns you, then you're a CEO. Welcome to business, right? And so there's this big misnomer between I'm an owner and I'm a CEO. And a lot of people say I'm a small business owner, but you really don't own the business for a very long time. Until you get to $10, $20 million a year, very tough to own a business. The business owns you. That's okay. Because what else are you going to do, right? You're going to work anyways. So you have to be on the path. But I think it's good to have.
Yeah, just going back to the whole eight-figure business thing, that's where my mindset is, because that's where we actually see where me and my wife, where we can actually kind of step away a little bit from all of the day-to-day of the business. But until we get there, we're definitely in the trenches.
Clarity around that, because the amount of times it's I've got this new opportunity vehicle. And people always quote my story back to me. They're like, hey, but you had the gyms and then you started doing the turnaround business. Yeah, I was 26. And before that, I had 9 businesses and I made no money. And so this was a big improvement for me, right? But the real question is not, did it work, but was there an alternative that would have also worked? Which is, if I had just stuck with gyms, being super real, at this point in my life, I probably have 200 or 300 locations, probably worth the same amount of money I am now. And so there's the fallacy of success, which is, if I do this thing.
But what's funny, Russell Brunson sold him on the idea of gym launch, essentially, where he licensed out or had this model of how he'd make gym owners or people who own gyms make their gyms more profitable. So also depends who your friends are. It's kind of like Bill Gates or Warren Buffett convincing Bill Gates to sell his shares in Microsoft and diversify. And guess what? If he hadn't, Bill Gates would be like a trillionaire now, but he is not.
It will work, and the fact that it works meant that it was the right call, but you can have multiple outcomes that lead you to where you want to go. But when you straddle multiple is where you guarantee that you'll never get there. And I'm just saying this and I'm trying to beat this into ground because one, I'm shouting at me, mostly, but also because it's probably a third of the conversations I have on a regular basis. And the crazy thing is that all the problems I just said have nothing to do with, I need more leads, I need to learn how to sell better, I need to follow up my leads faster, I'm not retaining customers, none of that. These are the things that get you stuck. These are very easy problems to solve. Market more, do more reps on the sales, reach out faster. These are not complicated things, but it's all this crap that we stay stuck in because we stay in these rock and hard place scenarios, which are the real core issues. And the last problem, bonus, that I see on a regular basis that walks through these doors is you have a product and you don't have a business. So you sell one widget one time to one person. There's no back end, there's no upsell, there's no recurring, there's no revenue retention. That's, from the strict definition of a business, it makes money. So it is technically a business. But it is not an asset that is valuable. And so that's something that you will consistently have to put inputs into rather than it be self-sustaining. And so I've always been in the world, and probably you are too, where like I will solve any problem, no matter how complex, once. But I don't like having to solve them the same thing over and over and over and over again. But when you're in that business, you have to just keep doing the same thing over and over again, and the day that you stop is the day that it dies. Which really just means that it's an amplified version of you in terms of a job, which again is fine, but I would rather build an asset that I can own rather than just a slightly fancier, higher leverage job for myself, if I can afford to do it. And so when you're thinking about this with your business, to be clear, it's selling a better or extra version or recurring version of whatever your thing is so that people will buy again. Now, there are businesses where it is reoccurring rather than recurring. Coca-Cola doesn't have no subscription, but they know that I buy and I will buy again. And so if people are not buying your product again, then figure out why. And if your business is one that doesn't lend itself to that at all, that's one where I'd say, look at the other businesses that are super billion-dollar businesses in your space, that what have they solved that you haven't? And then that becomes your path. And if there is no business that is in your space that sells that one thing that's very big, not all businesses are worth owning. And you might think, wait, Alex, I thought that I had to stick with the hard thing. And so the fundamental, this is a different rock and hard place, is one of the quintessential questions of entrepreneurship is, do I push or do I pivot? And so 9 times out of 10, you have to push. It just means I have a problem that I don't know how to solve. And if you have a problem that you can at least define the problem, then you can try and solve it. If you have an issue.
Okay, I can actually add a little bit of information in here because he hit on a really core issue. Is like if you know what your problem is or if you don't know what your problem is. And one of the things I'm really scared about is, so there's like known unknowns. So like he said, you know what the problem is, but you don't know how to solve it. But then there's unknown unknowns, which are like the scariest things in the world because it's a problem that you don't know that you have and you don't know what the problem is. Now, sometimes, like he said, like indicatively, like you might know that you have a problem in your business, but oftentimes, like these are like the ones that'll sneak up and really bite you in the rear. So
that the market fundamentally, like wedding rings. If you can only sell one wedding ring and you have no desire to create more wedding rings and you're not a jeweler, then it's probably not the right business for you. Now, the caveat there is that there's probably a jeweler who that is the perfect business for and loves doing all sorts of wedding rings and then also gets into the girls' rings and gets into multiple rings and expounds from that because they have a specific avatar they can serve. So there's a version of this business that could work. But businesses don't die. Entrepreneurs fade. Entrepreneurs lose their sizzle. They lose their love of the business. And so one of the things that has helped me stay in love with businesses that I have for longer periods of time, and I've had to learn these disciplines because that's what it takes to stick with something for a very long time. And if I know that sticking with something for a very long time is what's required to build this very big thing that I want to do, then I better learn that skill. And so learning to re-love new things in the business, which I like to frame as, what do I not know how to do? And so I love personal development. I think that entrepreneurship is one of the best paths to making yourself better because you have such a quantitative measure of saying, did you improve? And so simply saying, I don't know how to, rather than this business won't work because, is a much more empowering frame. So rather than say, hey, this business won't work because the market doesn't like my stuff, you say, I don't know how to market my stuff. This business won't work because no one can sell like I can. No, I don't know how to get someone else to sell like I can. That's solvable. And so simply reframing what I believe to be problems that I cast onto the universe as things that I cannot change, where I place the finger of blame, you flip to the thumb of accountability and say, this is a skill deficiency, and because it is mine, I can change it. And so thinking about things from that perspective has really helped me be able to fall in love with the game of business because I can constantly feel and see myself objectively get better. These are skills I didn't have, and now I do have this. I couldn't focus on anything for more than 6 months in the very beginning of my career. I'm more ADD than you. I promise. I have no direct reports. 0. Can't manage people. I don't have the skill. The question is, what return do I get on learning everything that Layla has? Well, she spent the last decade doing it. So that's not going to be a good return on my time. And so, but for her to try and learn all the acquisition market stuff that I know, is going to not be a good return on her time. And so that's how we divide things up. And so I can go deeper and better on mine. And that's how you start filling out the holes in a business. Because fundamentally, every business operates, I'm trying to give a non-bodybuilding example. But you need every component of a car to work, right? Like, is the wheel more important than the engine? You need both. If you don't have an engine, the car doesn't move.
Wow, this ad is taking forever to load.
The future of your business is here. With Wix, you get advanced AI.
If you don't have wheels, the car doesn't move. You don't have a chassis, there's no car, right? Like there's these core components that have to exist. But once you have those things, if you have better grip on the tires, the car will go faster. If you have more cylinders in there, I don't know the car analogy, but you get the idea. If you have a faster engine, the car goes faster. And so you can still have components that can get emphasized. But for the business to work, you have to have all the pieces to go from 0 to 1. But from 1 to n, it's how many of these things are we emphasizing, and that's where you can double down on things. But being able to say, the problem with this business is that this is the issue. We can't get, this engine needs to be a 16-cylinder, and it's an 8-cylinder. Okay, so I either have to learn how to build a 16-cylinder engine, or I got to find somebody who does. Or I got to buy a 16-cylinder engine from somebody else, right? But that's how you have to approach it. And so continually relearning that process has helped me stick with things because I don't feel like I'm in the same business anymore. I feel like every 6 months I'm in a completely different business because the problems I'm solving are different. And so I'll leave you with this one last thought, which is that, number one, I genuinely believe if you love the business or space that you're in, you can take any business to $100 million. I want to challenge somebody to tell me like a business they can't take to $100 million a year. I think you can absolutely take any business to $100 million a year. The second thing is that when you scale any business, no matter the market, at the highest level, your day is the same. You manage a handful of very intelligent people who do their jobs on your behalf with lots of leverage. That's the end result of all of these businesses, whatever business you're in. And so if you're in that spot where you're like, I don't like the business I'm in, you're going to get to the same spot in a different business that you also won't like. You have to beat the boss so that you can eventually get to the place where fundamentally you're going to have a head of marketing, you're going to have a head of sales, you're going to have an IT head, you're going to have a head of legal, you're going to have a head of finance, you're going to have a head of ops and customer success. Every business has it. Different words for different industries, but fundamentally those are the components. And so if you see that as the natural extreme that's going to occur in any business, the idea of switching businesses because you want to avoid what the natural extreme will be is ridiculous. Because if you succeed, all roads lead there. And so that is one of my antidotes for, wait, I should switch, because my day-to-day, what I actually do, will not change. And neither will yours. And so you have to push through, you have to confront the fact that it will suck, and you have to undo mistakes, and when you undo mistakes, it hurts extra bad. But the alternative is you never fix the mistake, you never grow, which I think is the larger mistake overall. So those are the big 5 that people get in the rock and hard place for business. I see these every single time. I have these conversations over and over again, and everyone thinks that their situation is unique, that they can't raise prices because their market is special, right? They can't change the compensation structure because everyone will leave. Yep, and they're going to leave eventually anyway, so you might as well learn how to fix it now. And they think that in order to hit the goal, like they have to keep selling even though they're overextended, they have no one to help them. You're right, keep doing that forever. Tell me how that works, right? Each of these problems feels in the moment less bad to keep doing it, but what you have to do is confront it. And that's the boss that you have to beat at that level.
Well, and the crazy thing is we all probably know someone like that who thinks they're special, that doesn't think they can raise their prices, and they run their business until they run themselves or the business both into the ground.
So thank you guys so much for the ads. Hope you guys enjoyed the workshop. Appreciate you.
All right.
And then
where did that video go? Let's watch the next one.
Let's keep doing it, but what you have to do is confront it. And that's the boss that you have to beat at that level. So thank you guys so much for the ads. I talked to a room full of business owners for 8 hours about how to make more money.
Wow.
Here's one of the best moments about how to improve your offer.
Yeah, so we're going to go 2 for 2 here. I just want to see. I'm doing a little test here. I want to know if I go live for longer on YouTube, does it literally do anything at all to the views?
So there's something called in the software called willingness to pay, which is like what's the thing that gets people to want to buy. And so they plotted everything across this chart in terms of the features. Like what are the things in the offer that had the highest willingness to pay that people value the most? So you want to be in this box over here. And the 4 things that they found were exclusive. 1 was access, just so we have buckets to think about this through. Exclusive content, exclusive events, and the way they ran this research study.
Oh, I messed up. I did do this video the other day. Let's just
Every business needs to solve each of these 4 problems in need.
go back here. You know what? Let's do.
So you run a successful coaching business, or at least you want to. I get it.
Every business needs to solve each of these. What you have to do is confront it.
Sorry, guys. This is the most.
And that's the boss that you have to beat at that level. So thank you guys so much for the ads. Hope you guys enjoyed the workshop. Appreciate you. And then
Let's do one that's not an hour long. Maybe, maybe not. Let's just go Alex Hormozi. All of his videos though lately have been so long. Let's look at this one.
I started and sold a software company, started and sold a gym licensing business, started and sold a supplement company, and 6 other businesses over the last 13 years. The vast majority of businesses that I talk to, the entrepreneurs think they're in one business, but they're actually in another. By only being able to solve one set of problems, they continue to jump from business to business to business, rather than realize there's one big problem, the business they're actually in, that unlocks all the enterprise value that gets it to the next level. But if you want to make a big business, you want to build an asset that's going to make you generationally wealthy, this is for you. I have made the mistake in almost every business that I've been in thinking I was getting into one business, when in reality, I was getting into a very different business. And discovering the real business that you're actually in is what will unlock the amount of growth and money making that you really want to get into. It's usually the second and third level of entrepreneurship within whatever opportunity you're pursuing. So let me give you an example, kind of make this real. When I got into the gym business, I liked fitness. And so I thought that the business was going to be about like macros and results and workouts and all of that. That's what I thought the business was going to be about. But once I got into the business, I realized it was actually just about marketing and sales. That specific business is about marketing and sales overall. Now, when I make these generalizations, all businesses are like cars. Like if you don't have wheels, the car's not gonna move. If you don't gas, the car's not gonna move. If you don't have an engine, the car's not gonna move. But the question is, what is the biggest limiter? What's the biggest thing that gives you the most return in that specific vehicle or that for specific business?
Yeah, I say this all the time. Like you can have wider margins. You can, well, if you argue with some marketers, some people will say if you have the widest margins, therefore you can spend the most money on marketing, therefore you will win. But that's not always true, because some people will have really wide margins and they'll pull money out of the business. They won't necessarily be plowing that money back into marketing for the business. But like you can have wider margins, you can provide a better service, a better product, you can have better customer service, you can have all of these things, but people can outcompete you and run circles around you because they have better marketing and sales, for example. So
business. And so I'm going to walk you through 4 or 5 different businesses that I've been, what I thought it was versus what it really was. And then I'll turn it back to you and thinking about how you can apply that same methodology. And I'll bet you many of you, and I get this because I have a lot of conversations with business owners today, they don't know what business they're really in. All right. So I thought it was about fitness, but it was actually about sales and marketing. If you look at the biggest fitness companies in the world, like especially in the gym space, they're acquisition machines. That's what they are very, very good at. The actual fitness component of it is actually pretty minor, right? And I mean, I'll tell you this from talking to the franchisors who own many, many locations or privately owned ones have 1,000+ locations, that the fitness stuff is almost an afterthought. They're like, yeah, get people to sweat, move around, whatever. Because the reality is that within fitness, for example, the biggest problem is that people don't show up because of other reasons. And so you have to always go get more customers. The good news is that everyone's trying to lose weight 3 times a year. And so there are plenty of people. So that was the first business that I misunderstood what business I was really in. Now, thankfully, quickly I learned that, and then that became the skill set that I doubled down on. Now, with that, I then was like, okay, well, I'm going to start a supplement company, which was Prestige Labs. Now, again, I thought that business was going to be all about the product. I thought it was all going to be about the stuff that's inside of it. And so I got Dr. Cashy, my good friend, he's a PhD biochemist, one of the smartest human beings on earth. And I said, hey man, can you make the best products? I said, make a sandwich you would actually, because he made all these things for Olympians, and he would put together these trash bags full of like specific ingredients and specific compounds. And he's like, dude, these are going to be way too expensive. Like it's not going to be commercially viable based on the quality of the ingredients. And I was like, dude, just make the best product. I'll figure out how to sell it. And so that was the focus that I had in Prestige Labs. But guess what? Once I got into that business, I realized that it actually had very little to do with what was in the bottle, because basically anything that's in a bottle that you don't taste, the vast majority of products that are out there benefit off of placebo and nocebo effect. Basically, people taking something and then they feel better because they take something. And I want to be clear, placebo effects are real effects. So like, I'm about the effect. Whatever works for you, works for you. And that's not really the point of this talk, but more so that I got into the business thinking that what was inside the bottle was the thing that mattered, but the reality is what was on the outside of the bottle and the thing that the bottle was next to. Meaning it became, what I realized almost too late, was that it's a business that's based on brand. It's based on branding, and it's based on media in terms of having tons and tons of traffic. And so I thought I was building a product-based company that was going to be based on what's inside the bottle, when everything that was limiting the business, what was on the outside of the bottle. And I saw the guys who were the biggest in the space. And this is the little telltale sign, by the way, if you want to hack this, is you look at the people who are the biggest in your space. So take your model, take it to its natural extreme, and look. And I think there's a lot of wisdom that can be found from that and trying to reverse engineer, like, what are the things that make this different? Now, you might be like, and this is what I used to do. All right. So like, don't make this mistake. When I was in the gym industry, I would look, like when I started, I was like, oh my God, I can make way better workouts than those guys. That's because those guys don't give a shit about their workouts, because that's not the main thing in the business. I got into the supplement business, like, oh my God, like these guys are making hundreds of millions of dollars on this product that's just mediocre. Like the thing is that most of the customers that are buying it don't even know the difference anyways, which means that your differentiator isn't actually making you different. You're the only one who knows your differentiator, which is not good. Your customer has to realize what the differentiator is. And so the thing is that for most supplements, the differentiator is LeBron takes it, or so-and-so takes it, or I think this is cool, or my friend Sally likes it, right? Or, and I'll be clear, on a consumables perspective, if it has a flavor, then the flavor becomes very important in the long run in terms of how good it tastes, because most people take AG1 because they think it tastes good and because they feel good about it, not because of what's inside of it. All right. So just to be clear, I got into the gym business and I thought it was about fitness, but it was really about marketing and sales. I got into Prestige Labs, the supplement business, and I thought it was about the stuff inside the bottle, when it was really about brand and building a big media traffic machine. And then I was like, okay, I think I'm getting the hang of this. I'm just making mistakes over and over again. So then I got into the software business and I was like, okay, I get it. Everything's about marketing and sales. I'll be able to sell the shit out of this. And guess what? We sure as hell could, because I knew how to market and sell. And so then I got into the software business, and I realized, by the way, side note, software tends to sell itself. You know why? Because if you can have technology and say, hey, there's that thing that you're doing that this will do automatically, not a very hard pitch. But the problem with software is actually delivering on the promise. And so it actually is a very product-driven business, because anyone can sell it. The constraint, like software is not that difficult to sell. At least this is my experience with this. All right. So take that with my big
Better futures start now with the Ninja Trader mobile app with the power to customize how you trade.
Himalayan size grain of salt. For me, that's when I realized that product was the main thing. And guess what I done when I started out? I outsourced the product. I had an outsourced dev team make the product for me, which I then realized was the core part of the business. It's like starting a supplement company, then trying to have an agency build your supplement company for you. If you're in the supplement business or you're in the consumer product goods business, outsourcing acquisition, outsourcing brand, outsourcing media is like, that's the business. Like that's the business you're in. It's not the stuff inside the bottle. All right. So I'll give you another one. So I had a gym owner, friend of mine from many, many years ago. He became a gym lord. He was a licensee, awesome guy. And he started, he had a couple locations and his wife started a cleaning business because they got into Airbnbs because he started making money in the gym. So he started investing and he realized he actually liked real estate better than he liked the gym, which is awesome. Great. And so they started a cleaning company to clean houses for their Airbnbs. But then they realized they got in the Airbnb community and they also got in just like that area. And they're like, you know what, we could probably just sell cleaning to other people. And so this was interesting. I had dinner with him and he was saying, I was like, so what's your LTV to CAC? He's like, oh dude, CAC's like $25. And I was like, what? He's like, oh, getting customers in cleaning, not a problem. And he was like, this is so different from the gym business because the gym business, getting the customers, you have to arm wrestle Susie for an hour to get her to say, yeah, she's going to stop eating crap and start coming to the gym 3 times a week. But if you just say, hey, I'm going to clean your stuff and you don't have to do anything, not a very hard sale. And so he said, the real problem that I'm having right now is actually getting people to do the cleaning, right? He's actually getting people who speak English, who don't steal, who show up on time and do all that and like do a good job consistently. He said, that's actually the problem in the business. And so it was this great moment for me because I love finding out what is the real business behind the business. And so if you're in the cleaning business, you're not in the cleaning business, you're in the recruiting and training business. You have to learn how to get low skill labor in high volume to show up for you consistently, which is a cultural thing. It's a training thing. And part of that has to do with brand, but a lot of it is just having the incentive system structured such that that type of person can still succeed. And he had a cool little thing that he did. He had a setup where they got paid not by hour, but by clean. And so they were actually incentivized. And so basically, and this, by the way, big pro tip on business, is you want to have paired incentives. So it's like having quality and speed. And so it's like if you have a customer support team, you want to measure them not just on like percentage of tickets that are absolutely resolved. You also want to have speed of completion. If you only have one, then you have lots of people responding as quickly as possible, but not getting it done. And on the flip side, if you just do on whether the ticket is completely resolved, people won't move fast enough. And so it's having paired metrics. Andy Grove talks about this in High Output Management. Really good book if you ever like want to learn more about ops.
High Output Management. I have actually not read that book. I'm writing that down. So the other interesting thing he said there, I liked how he was talking about pairing the two, because if you pair the two, phenomenal. And you want to pair them with aligned incentives, so things that will make sense. You want like tickets resolved, but you also want them quickly resolved. So again, those incentives have to be aligned with like what the business needs, and also they need to make sense for. So like if you're to tie comp into that, like it would have to make sense for the employee as well.
Pretty high level though, just to be really honest with you, but it's a great book. Anyway, and so the paired metric for him was you can clean as many houses as you can in a day, and I pay you per clean. And so that drove up his productivity per employee. And so the paired metric was that if you don't do a good job, you have to go back and do it again at no cost. And so that was the deal. And that was also part of his offer for the cleaning thing. And it worked really great. And so like, if you don't think we do a good job, we'll come back and clean your whole house again and we'll do it for free. And so that was the paired metric. Again, so he thought he was getting the acquisition business. He's like, dude, I can get customers all day long in this business. And it's because he came from the gym world and expected it to be the same. And so I've noticed this continued thing is that what I think I'm getting into is actually not the real constraint of the business. And I don't want to leapfrog ahead here, but like, this is a little bit of foreshadowing for the woman in the red dress. All right. So I'll just leave that there. All right. So I'll give you one for anybody who's in like the consulting space or professional services space. If you sell to businesses, you sell how to market, even accounting, you sell lawyer stuff, you do consulting in general, any of that stuff, you think that you're in the marketing and sales business, right? Because that's what people will tell you, right? But if you really want to play this game at a high level, now again, it's a car. If you have no marketing and sales, you're not gonna have a business, right? Duh. But which is the thing that unlocks the biggest level of growth is actually, again, look at the biggest companies in the space. You look at EY, Ernst & Young, you look at KPMG, you look at McKinsey, you look at Bain, you look at BCG, some of these big public massive firms, multi-billion dollar, $100 billion companies. What is the business they're really in? They're in the recruiting business as well. And specifically the talent management business, because different than the cleaning business. Now, structurally it's recruiting for sure, but it's at a completely different level. They're trying to skim the cream of the crop, because how do you scale expertise? They're intelligence on demand. If you go to you go to Pulcinella, you go to some big law firm, right? In Manhattan, right? Some big law firm with a Manhattan address. They have to attract the absolute best and brightest people. Otherwise, the brand will degrade over time. But how do you attract the best and brightest people? Well, that's why a lot of these professional services businesses are based on partnerships. They're limited partnerships. They're LLPs. All right. And so that's because they have a track for eventually becoming an owner in the business. And most service-based businesses that rely on expertise have tracks for people to have small slices of ownership. And they're willing to have a small slice of a $200 billion pie rather than start out on their own. And they also have subspecialties underneath of that. You're a IP lawyer, you're a defense lawyer, whatever. They have all these different subtracts underneath of that. And so again, you get into the consulting business and people say, hey, it's about marketing and sales. But really, if you want to scale, and again, this is the thing, if you want to scale, if you just want to make money, then sure, just market and sell and you can make a buck, right? That's not the problem. But if you want to get big, you want to build an asset, the business you get in there is on talent. And how do you retain talent? And how do you improve the value of that talent and make them live? Because otherwise, what do you do? What happens if you do a great job with talent in that business, but you don't retain them? They take your.
So like with where we're at with like marketing and sales within like the online space, huge issue, because a lot of the coaches, they don't take the time to hire the right people to actually help on fulfillment. It's something I think we've actually done a pretty decent job here at Landing Media by hiring people that have experience in the different areas and training them up as like CSMs to actually fulfill and help fulfill on the surface in their areas of expertise where they know more than us, or they know the same amount of us, but they're not necessarily us. And I think we've done a pretty good job with that. I think it will get even better in the future as we scale and get bigger, because we'll be able to have more people and more areas of expertise, and we'll also have better cross training and like SOPs for sharing of information within the company as well. However, it's it's one of those things where a lot of people it's hard. It's not an easy thing to do.
Your customers and they leave, they start their own shop, they hang their own shingle up. That's the game there, right? So the figure, what you have to figure out, this is the big $1 billion problem, is what you have to do. All right. Now, I'll leave it at that because I think I made the point. Now, here's why this is important, is that if you know the business that you're really in, you actually can get paid to solve the right problem. All right. Now, the way that I like to think about this is that, like, as entrepreneurs, we get paid to solve problems, and the bigger the problem, the bigger the payoff. And so I like to imagine, like, I've got this big, massive wall in front of me. And the thing is I see the wall, but I don't know how thick it is. But I have an idea that it's pretty thick, right? So I'm like, shoot, I don't know how to get through this wall. But I like to mentally envision myself that there's this big pile of money on the other side. And I remember having this conversation with the portfolio company. We're like, hey, we think that we need to build software into this business and actually transform this business from a media company into a software company. And it's like, this is a big strategic bet. Like, a lot of resources, a lot of time, basically a lot of like lost growth. Like, instead of us gassing it on this side, we're actually going to basically maintain here and then deploy a lot of resources into growing software. And so I was talking to the founder, and he was like, this is really hard. This is going to be really, really hard for us to do. And I was like, yeah, it's going to be really hard. And I said, but if we solve it, we get an extra $250 million. So does that feel worth it? And he was like, well, when you say it like that. And I was like, right. So for $250 million, would I solve it? Yeah, it feels a lot more approachable, or at least it feels worth it. And so I'd encourage you to think, like, what is the ultimate price tag of me solving this problem worth? And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, then you can actually appropriately allocate your personal resources to solving the problem, because it really will make you a lot of money. Now, a lot of times we need to frame the problem for what we get by solving it. Otherwise we avoid solving it. And so knowing the business that you're really in isn't really what you think it is. It's often the second or third order effect. And that's the big wall. And so you come in, like my friend did. He starts acquiring customers. He's like, I'm going to make so much money here. And he's like, oh shoot, I got to hire and staff people. Boom. He sees this big wall and he's like, oh, I'm not equipped to solve this problem. And here it is. This is the meat. This is the part that I've been waiting to get you and hammer you guys on is, hey, and if you'd like to get personalized advice on how to scale your business and unlock the enterprise at our headquarters here in Vegas for businesses problems, unlock some big value. If that sounds a little interesting, go to as soon as you realize the business you're really in, and you also realize that you're not equipped to solve it because you don't know what the hell you're doing and you don't know what you got into to begin with, that is when the woman in the red dress appears. Now, if you're not familiar with my stuff, the woman in the red dress is any shiny object. It's the distraction. And the interesting thing about the woman in the red dress is that the better you get at business, the hotter she is. And so, like, you think you learn to say no to a 2 out of 10. Yeah, because you've got some crackhead lady on the side of the street. It's like, okay, she's like, hey, let's go. And you're like, I'm good. I'd rather just not get chlamydia / whatever you've got, right? And so all businesses have shit. They all have shit. They all have a big brick wall that you have to come in contact with. And guess what? That's why you get paid to solve the fucking problem. That's why you make outsized returns, is because you have to be willing to confront with the sledgehammer in hand, not knowing how thick the wall is going to be, and start hammering away at it with the hope that when you get to the other side, it will have been worth it. And often it is. Now, I want to drive this point home. So if you have a roofing business, if you have a restaurant business, if you have a dry cleaning business, all you have to do is look at the world and see, is there any version of this business that is a $1 billion company or even a $100 million company, whatever your goals are. And most times you'll find that there is that. But you'll also find that it just takes time to get there, because the amount of times I have, let's say small business, it actually happens a lot, right? Is, hey, I've got a roofing contracting business. Okay, cool. And they say, hey, should I jump into a different opportunity vehicle? I'm like, well, okay, well, what are you doing? They're like, I'm doing $4 million top line. I'm doing $1 million in bottom line. Okay. Well, why don't you just 10x the size of your company? And then they say, well, I've got this big concrete wall in front of me, right? What they describe.
Back in 2022, I lost 2 very important people in my life. Big figures. It really wasn't until February.
Next is the real problem of that business.
Let me pause that, unmute. You gotta look and see. You gotta look left, you gotta look right, and you gotta see what the actual opportunity is. And then you gotta see how those people got there. Part of it's time, but also, like, for example, going back, talked a lot about my dad today. Actually, in this more than I usually do. But for example, farming. Where he farmed in Western Oregon, there wasn't tons of room to expand and buy more land. And all the really big farmers who are out in the Midwest, for example, or down in Brazil, the reason how they're able to become really big and, these multi-$100 million farming organizations where they buy tractors, from John Deere in a pack of 300. Yeah, I said that right. They'll buy 300 tractors at once from John Deere. And if you don't know anything about tractors, they're like new tractors from John Deere, depending on the horsepower, is anywhere from $100,000 all the way up to almost $1 million, depending on what you're getting it set up with. And if you're buying 300 of those at once, you're a pretty big farm. So anyways, the issue is like, the constraint was land. But he didn't realize that until he was already too far into it. And farming is a little bit different. and also like having like kids and family, it's a little bit harder business in a lot of ways because you kind of have to uproot your family. If you're going to move, you have to move a lot of equipment, and there's a big risk. And sometimes you're going to go from farmland where you got relatively quote unquote cheaply because of where you started because there wasn't a ton of demand for it, to going and buying really expensive farmland where it's like going from $500 an acre to $5,000 an acre, or vice versa. But you have to like look and you have to see if that vehicle that you're in is going to achieve your goals, like Alex said, and then also what other people who have achieved those goals, like what does that actually look like for them?
Business, the business that they're really in that they didn't know they were getting into. And I'll be clear, this only happens at scale. All right. So once, like all businesses, like if you're new to entrepreneurship, you got to figure out the basics of everything. You got to figure out that a wheel is round. You got to make sure the gasoline is combustible. You got to make sure that there's some sort of engine. It might be a sewing machine in the beginning that's powering your car. It might be a remote control car that can only go 10 miles an hour. But like there's got to be some engine, otherwise you're not going to get any movement, right? But when you start really wanting to achieve scale, there's going to be a big hairy problem. There's going to be a big concrete wall in front of you that you don't know how thick it is. And that is the work. That is where the enterprise value is unlocked. And the vast majority of the time, when we're investing in a company or we take over a company, we are just comfortable with the fact that there's a concrete wall and we're just going to chip away at it. And so a lot of the work that I do is actually expectation management with the team, is saying, yeah, this is going to take 2 years. Yeah, this will take 3 years. And they're like, wait, 3 years? I'm like, yeah. Well, I'm in this for let me put it this way. If in 5 years we had $100 million enterprise to this business, is it worth it? They're like, well, yeah. And I'm like, do you think we can solve it in 5 years? I'm like, well, yeah. But then guess what they don't do? Be willing to wait 5 years. And so the thing is that sometimes it takes somebody from the outside to say like, dude, let's zoom all the way out. If you solve this for $100 million, is it worth it? Yeah. Okay. Well, it's going to take that long. Oh. And then things start to settle. And then you get less frenetic energy. The amount of wasted effort for entrepreneurs that goes into this ideation of what else they could be doing with their time or with their skill sets. Honestly, it's like, great analogy. It's like being single versus being married. All right, hear me out. Is that when you're single, at least for me, when I was a guy, I would say 30% of my time was, I'm being generous, maybe 40% of my time, might have been higher. Anyway, I'm not getting into it, was allocated to like the idea of chasing tail. So it was like, man, what if that worked out? What if that worked out? And I'm spinning multiple plates. I'm doing lead nurture, right? I'm working the pipeline. I'm planting seeds. I'm making a quippy comment. I'm responding to a story, whatever. And so I'm working leads. And so as I was doing this, right, all my attention was going to possibility, was to potential, was to what if, right? As soon as I got married, the biggest gift that marriage got me was it got me 30 to 40% of my time back. Was I didn't have to think about this. Like this part of my life was not done, but like solved. As in like, I'm going to be with Layla. Cool. Great. Now all the extra attention that used to go to like possibility in terms of who else could be goes back into the main thing, which for me was business. Now within the business, it works the same way. Is that I think most of you guys are dating your business, but you need to get married to your business. You guys are trying to have friends with benefits with your business, trying to go on dates, maybe date a couple other businesses on the side, have some side chicks, and then you're wondering why your relationship with your business isn't that healthy. If you go all in on the business will go all in on you. And I promise you, it's just that the guy who's beating you right now, he's just committed. He's just married. He's just married to the business. He's like, if it takes me 5 years, it takes me 5 years. But like, where am I going? Like, I'm in this. I'm in it for the long haul. And he sees.
Yeah, if you listen to like founders podcasts or read like tons of autobiographies, super recurring theme where, they burn all other ships. This is what they're doing. They're going to figure it out one way or another.
What the value of a 30-year marriage would be, or a 50-year marriage would be with his business. And so if you know the business you're really in, which you usually find out a couple of years into the business, which is once you solve the basics of business, you realize, oh, this is the big hairy problem. And then you don't know how long it will last, but I promise you that someone else has solved it. And I promise you that they weren't super geniuses. They just were willing to commit. They were willing to swing the hammer at the wall for a very long period of time and willing to zoom out and say, I can think in 5-year increments. And do I think that if I put everything I have and not get distracted with the woman in the red dress, not have the side chick, not have these other businesses I'm flirting with that I'm keeping warm on the side, these networking lunches for this guy I might do a partnership with, even though it has nothing to do with this business because he says, hey, you're good at this, I'm good at this, we could do this thing together. None of that. And just being like, no, I'm just going to keep slamming at this wall because if I just get this one thing right, if I just break through this wall, I will unlock all of the wealth that I've ever wanted. But there is a big, thick, massive, gray, boring wall between there and where you want to go. And it's just who's willing to keep swinging the hammer for a long period of time without getting distracted and without thinking they're smarter than they are. Keep being awesome. Fucking slay. Look.
Yeah. Moral of the story here, just to wrap this up. You just got to keep going. Never give in, never give up, and keep at it. That's what equals success. Talk about it all the time. Talked about it in this video. Success is a function of time. The more time you put in, the more success you're going to have. And the thing is sometimes it's very flatlined and then, hockey stick shaped graph with your success because a lot of the times you have to have multiple things in place for that success to materialize. You might have figured out 3 of the 4, 5 of the 6 keys, right? But until you get that 5th or 6th or whatever one it is, you're not going to see that success materialize. So just like Alex said, make sure you figure out what game you're playing, who else has already played the game, and how they played that game to get where you want to go. You do all that, it's going to just make your life a lot easier. And yeah, to end the stream for today, guys, if you haven't already, if you're still watching this, please subscribe to the channel. I try and post content every single day to help you grow your business and make you a better entrepreneur. And I also try and document how I am becoming better as an entrepreneur as well.